Welcome back, folks. Sheepdog Smokey here. Another week, and current events has once again invaded the channel. I don't know how many of you watched the presidential or vice presidential debates, but it was more of the same that we saw in 2016, 2012, 2008. Debates have jumped the shark, basically. If you go back to the 1960s, the very first televised debates, that alone should have told the country where things would go. I can remember reading about how one of the biggest responses to Kennedy's first debate on TV was appearance. Appearance should not matter in any way when it comes to a world leader. Okay? Winston Churchill certainly did not physically look the part of the man who would ultimately decide the course of World War II for Britain. Winston Churchill also, his personality was very much antagonistic to almost everyone around him. The famous joke that a woman walks up to him in the early morning and says, "You're already drunk." He says, "Yes, but you're ugly and I'll be sober in the morning." I have no proof that that actually came from him, although that is something he would have done. Churchill very much was the 1940s Donald Trump, without the billion-dollar empire. He was very blunt. He said exactly what he meant. He was an orator. Donald Trump, look at the rallies, and you look at how the people respond. Whereas you look at Joe Biden's incredibly small rallies, and people are sitting and listening. It's a dichotomy, honestly. But we have reached, and it only took us 60 years, we've reached a point where televised, organized debating no longer really works. I took speech and debate in college. I never took it in high school, although I did play around with it when I would go in after school to look at the practices. And I did a little bit of debate in government class in high school. But in college, I actually took speech and debate, joined the speech and debate team, and I won awards for extemporaneous and for parliamentary debate. In parliamentary debate, the only time you can actually speak when it's not your turn is to raise a point of order. If someone makes a blatant lie, but they're not insulting, they're not breaking any of Robert's Rules of Order, you can't break in and say that's not true. You have to wait until your turn to rebut their point. When we look at we'll just say the last two rounds, so this year and 2016, neither side does that. It's even worse this year than it was 4 years ago. Although I will say Vice President Pence was far closer to sticking to Robert's Rules of Order than anyone else. Trump and Biden both interrupted each other quite a bit. Biden sunk to childish insults. So would you just shut up? You're a clown. This man wants to be president, and he plays the part of Donald Trump is not presidential. But in a debate, gets so riled that he calls his opponent a clown and tells him to shut up. This does not in any way excuse Donald Trump interrupting Joe Biden. That's just who Donald Trump is. Kamala Harris, of course, interrupts Vice President Pence quite a bit, even at one point says, "I am speaking," and he very simply responds, "If you're going to speak, speak truthfully." The very next day, all of the media, virtually all of the media, was just losing their minds about how Vice President Pence mansplained to Kamala Harris because he dared speak during the debate. He was asked questions, and he responded. And because he's male and Kamala Harris is female, they immediately demand that the victory be handed to her because she's female. This is the same group of people who will tell you that being male or female is a choice and can change every minute. They will tell you that They want true equality. But the second that true equality happens, Pence, Harris, they debated. Pence brought the lightning and he won the debate. They immediately jumped to mansplaining. They don't want equality. They want to rule. And this is, both sides are guilty of this, have been for the last 30 years. I have been closely following politics since 1992. I was 15 at the time. I didn't get to vote until 1996. And I've very closely followed politics. I've enjoyed the study of government, economics, history, the social sciences since high school. And it's a problem. We have both parties resort to tactics like this. In 1998, Jerry Nadler is on video, and I have a copy of the video, screaming that the Republicans want to undo the election because Bill Clinton was impeached for perjury. He was impeached, he was convicted, and he was censured. He was not removed from office. He was not restricted in his constitutional power. He was not impeached for having an affair. He was impeached for lying under oath, perjury. And Nadler, Pelosi, and every other Democrat in office at the time was outraged that the Republicans were trying to undo an election. 2016 to 2020, the Democrats are working very hard to undo the election. And this time they're screaming it's their right. And the Republicans are sitting back and letting them. We have an incredibly small population in Congress that truly abide by their oath. One need only look at Tulsi Gabbard, Democrat, or Dan Crenshaw, Republican. Both of them give as good as they get to any and all people in Congress or in the country when something is not right. Tulsi was part of the debates for the Democratic nomination, and we all knew she wasn't going to get it. She's not liberal enough for him. Even now, she is proving that she is not a liberal. She is a libertarian, centrist. She's not conservative either. Not surprising, being that I believe, if I'm right, she was raised in Hawaii, which is a fairly liberal state and has been for quite some time. And Congresswoman Gabbard is younger than I am, and I can remember Hawaii has been liberal as long as I can think of. But she's also a veteran. And that had an impact on her as well, where she still has some liberal values, but has some conservative values and some centrist values. She is a libertarian. Crenshaw is very much the same. He's more liberal than some parts of Texas, but more conservative than other parts of Texas. A veteran. And both of them give as good as they get in Congress. The problem is they are in the extreme minority. Neither one of them wants to stand up and say, wait a minute, 4 years ago, you were saying that we had to confirm a justice. Now you're telling the Senate not to. Because they know that will just alienate them and lose any and all ability to govern and serve the people of their district that they have at the time. Which is very sad. I mentioned on social media, I may have mentioned it here, Congressman Louis Gohmert from Tyler, Texas. In 2004, I lost my job with an electric company here in North Texas. And they took very good care of me. They were merging with another company who would provide the customer service while the electric provider was the provider. So basically they were fully embracing deregulation where they would actually generate and sell the power to this other company, still owned by them. And that company would sell to the homeowners. Both companies involved, the one I worked for at the time and the one they were merging with to create this new company, both of them paid me 2 months severance. I walked with 4 months of severance pay. I had COBRA that they covered for 6 months. Plenty of time to find a new job. I was talking with my parents. I was 27 at the time. And my mother looked at me over lunch and said, you've wanted to go back to college for a while. Move home, deliver pizza or something, and go back to college. So I did. This was in October of 2004 that this happened. And the congresswoman from my district, the congresswoman was not up for re-election in 2004, but Louis Gohmert was going against Max Sandlin in Tyler. I went to Tyler with a bunch of people from her district. We walked all over Tyler for 3 or 4 days. We knocked on doors. We told people about Louis. Told him all that he's at this location all day long, every day for the rest of the week. Come meet him, talk to him. And in Blue East, Texas, we unseated the Democratic incumbent. But that's been 16 years. It's a long time in the swamp. And Louis is still a good man. He's a fighting Texas Aggie, and I know he's going to always be a good man. But unfortunately, the swamp can still get to you. So now I'm sure you're all wondering why I've been on this rant. And this is not partisan. I'm sure if you follow me on Twitter, you can guess my personal politics. This is not a high school classroom. When I taught, none of them knew who I was on social media. I would not allow photographs of me to be associated with my Twitter or my Facebook at the time. Just wouldn't allow it. And that is honestly the way it should be. I was teaching history, government, economics. I was teaching social sciences as a sub mostly, but long-term most of the time. My students would never have been able to tell you if I was a Democrat, Republican, conservative, or liberal. I taught the material. This is not a classroom. Okay, this is YouTube. Now, unlike today, when I go over history, it is non-partisan. It is what happened. Pardon me. When I go over next week the Constitution, and it will not be every word of it, it will not be every clause or every sentence. It will be a probably 15 to 20 minute video going over what Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 says, how they form the government. It is an overview. I've said this many times. If you want a copy, I have several hundred sitting right over there. Happily send you one. Email me at the email in the description. Once we get past that, then we start the leapfrog. War of 1812. We look at the 1860s. We look at antebellum and Reconstruction. We look at women's suffrage. Then we look at World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, civil rights, the 80s, the 90s. It's going to be a leapfrog. I anticipate that by spring break, I'll be done with my timeline. Then I'm just going to find topics that interest me for my Wednesday history class. Looking at Hannibal and the Swiss Alps, looking at Julius Caesar, looking at Darius and Xerxes in Persia versus Leonidas and the Greeks in Sparta and Greece. That's what I love to study, world history, history in general. I started off with American history because I feel it's relevant. It will give us a sense of how we got to where we are today. The problem is that power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. We have people who have been sitting in positions of power, be they media, government, or any other, for so long, they honestly believe there's nothing wrong with them doing anything that they do. I can tell you that 30 years ago, someone in a government intelligence agency falsifying a form to get a FISA warrant to spy on a political candidate, then falsifying an interview record to get someone that worked for the person they don't like but who still got elected, arrested and charged with however many charges are against Flynn, wouldn't have happened. 30 years ago, no judge would have looked at a prosecutor and said, no, you cannot drop charges. I'm going to require you to prosecute this man so he can be convicted. That's what we have today. I've said this before, and I'll just mention it in passing here. There is a link in the description to the Convention Stage Project. Check it out. Because, politicians and government employees are like diapers. Both should be changed regularly and often for Same reason. We were not meant to have career politicians. Regardless of the ideology at the beginning, a career in politics corrupts people so quickly and so horribly that you can't fix the system. I'm not advocating that we tear it all down and start over. I'm advocating we need new blood in Congress. Those 535 seats should turn over completely every 6 years, maybe every 8. Okay? Go, spend a term or two, come home. Get out before it eats you alive. We limit the president to 2 terms, well, 2 elections, no more than 10 years in office. Why not limit Congress to be the same? 2.5 terms max. It's 5 years for the House. I believe it'd be 10 years for the Senate. I'll have to go back to my Constitution. But the reason is Congress limited the president because of FDR. Roosevelt was about to get elected he had just been elected to his 3rd term, ultimately died in office. It was not wholly because of him, because they kept going. They didn't want any president to serve more than 2.5 terms. And the whole 2.5 terms is, if the vice president is inaugurated as president after the halfway point of their presidential term, they get to complete that and be elected twice more. Johnson couldn't do that in '63 because Kennedy had only served 10 months. So Johnson got more than 3 years of that. So Johnson didn't even get 2 full terms because of that limit. We need it. Because without it, we're going to just be stuck with more of the same crap coming out of D.C. We're seeing that we have control when it comes to the media, sports. The NBA has already reversed and said they're going to remove the big politicizing messages. The NFL is hemorrhaging viewers. CNN regularly gets beat for ratings by the Weather Channel or the Home Shopping Channel. And that's simply by us not watching them. Imagine the power the American population would have if we truly united and said, we're tired of career politicians, regardless of the party they're a part of. So, it's now you may be elected twice and serve no more than 2.5 full terms, or 2 full and 1/2 terms. For those that have already served longer than that, you're gone. Goodbye. Go home. For those that haven't, your time started when you first were sworn into office. It's not a partisan thing. It's a logical thing. Or it should be. Anyway, we've talked long enough. This is just another example of real life invading what would have been my classroom. I would be making a similar speech to my students were I a teacher. I would be talking about the debates. I would be talking about all of this. Because this very much is exactly why we study history and the other social sciences. Anyway, let me know what you think. As always, be civil in the comments. You don't have to be kind. You don't have to be sweet and nice, but be civil. We can dissent, discuss, and debate without resorting to base childishness. Please do so. Please also remember to like and subscribe, turn on notifications so that you're a part of the channel, and make sure to share the video to help grow the channel. I am doing my giveaway for the books at 500, 1,000, and 1,500 subscribers, but I have to get there first. Aside from that, everyone have a wonderful day.